Process scheduling criteria. On what criteria will the process be scheduled? CPU utilization. This is a percentage of time that the processor is busy. For an expensive shared system, this is a sufficient criteria. In a single user systems, and in some other systems such as real-time system, this criteria is less important than some of the other criteria. So what is CPU utilization? The amount of time the processor or the CPU is busy in processing a process. So it has been allocated with a process and it is busy in completing the task. Throughput. The work done by the CPU is the number of processes that are completed per time, called the throughput. So the number of processes which the CPU completes per time unit is called as the throughput. This clearly depends on the average length of the process but is also influenced by scheduling policies which may affect the utilization. Turnout time, the interval from the time of submission of the process to the time of completion is called as the turnaround time. So when the process is submitted, that means it is allocated to the CPU. So you are allocating it to the CPU till the time it takes to complete and exit the CPU. Complete and exit the CPU. That is called as a turnaround time. Turnaround time is the sum of periods spent waiting to get in the memory, waiting in the ready queue, executing on the CPU and doing the IO. Whole thing is calculated as a turnaround time. This process will go in the CPU. Then suppose it will need a IO request, it will go in the IO queue, that is the ready queue, and then again it goes in the CPU for its execution. This whole thing is called as the turnaround timer. Waiting time. The CPU scheduling algorithm does not affect the amount of time during which a process executes or does IO. It affects only the amount of time it spends waiting in the ready queue. So it does not calculate the amount of time it takes to get the IO transfer done or the process for amount of time it executes. What it counts is how much time it waited in the ready queue. Waiting time is the sum of the period spent waiting in the ready queue. So how much time it waited inside the ready queue. Response time. In an interactive system, turnaround time may not be the best criteria. Often, a process can produce some output fairly earlier and continue computing new results while the previous results are being output to the user. Thus, another measure is time from the submission of the request until the first response is produced. This is called as the response time. So, you have submitted the request and you have got your first response. That amount of time is called as the response timer. Is the time it takes to start responding, not the time it takes to output the response. So it is not calculating the total amount of time it is taking to exit the CPU, not calculating that. What it is calculating, that when will the first response occur. Fairness. Process should be treated the same and no process should suffer starvation. So no process should suffer starvation. Enforcing priorities. Scheduling policy should favor the highest priority process, the one which is of the highest priority, which has to be executed now at this present movement. That process will be given the first priority and it will be allocated in the CPU. So the highest priority process is always considered.